What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Modern Warfare, and in today's episode we're going to be covering the brand new LMG, which is the Mk9 Bruen. Now just a heads up, you might see some gameplay against bots. This is just because the servers at the moment are completely screwed up, and I'm not able to reasonably find matches, so I might have to mix some bot gameplay in there, and that would be why. But first up, as always, let's have a look at the damage profile. With the Mk9 Bruen, we have a base damage of 31, 28, 22. However, we do get an upper torso multiplier, and this is 34, 30, 24, which means it's going to be a 3 to 5 shot kill as long as you're hitting that upper torso. As for headshots, we get a 1.49 times headshot multiplier, and this means our headshot damage profile is 46, 42, 33, which means it's still going to be a minimum of 3 shots to kill. You can't get a 2-shot kill with this gun. Moving on to rate of fire, this is identical to the PKM as well as the Holger 26 at 759 rounds per minute. And this means our minimum time to kill up close in that 3-shot kill range is extremely fast at 158 milliseconds, and then it drops all the way down to 316 milliseconds in the 5-shot kill range. Speaking of ranges, our 3-shot kill range, again assuming we're hitting the upper torso, extends out to just over 40 meters, which is really solid, and then our 4-shot kill range will extend all the way out to 65 meters, which is an extremely good range value. On most regular like 6v6 and 10v10 maps, you won't be able to find a practical line of sight long enough to reach this range. As for suppressors, no surprises here. The lightweight suppressor will reduce our ranges by 25%, and the monolithic suppressor increases our ranges by 7.5%. Now, taking this into hardcore, our first damage range, it extends out to 42 meters. This is where this gun will always be a 1-shot kill. Even if you're shooting them in the toe, it's going to be a 1-shot kill. Then that second damage range, it extends out to 65 meters. Within this range, it's still a 1-shot kill as long as you're hitting the upper torso. However, if you shoot them in the lower torso or limbs, it won't be a 1-shot kill. As for hipfire, this LMG doesn't actually match up with any of the other LMGs. It's better than the PKM, the M91 and MG34, but just slightly worse than the SA87 and the Holger 26. Getting into idle sway, this is pretty standard for the LMG category. It's definitely got some movement while aiming down sight, but it is quite slow, so therefore you can be relatively precise with that first shot accuracy. Having a look at recoil, it's also great in this department. There's very little side-to-side bounce, it's mainly vertical recoil, and it's quite easy to control. Moving on to our handling stats, our aim down sight time is relatively standard for LMGs, and that is to say it's very slow at 450 milliseconds. It's just slightly slower than the PKM, just by 1 frame at 60 FPS. And our sprint out times are also not great. Our standard sprint out time is 367 milliseconds, which is a very long time in Call of Duty terms, and our tactical sprint out time is very slow at 484 milliseconds. As for our magazine capacity, this is great at 100 rounds with another 100 in reserve. And our reload add time is pretty slow if you're comparing it to most of the guns in the game, but when you consider the magazine capacity and compare it to something like the PKM, it's actually pretty decent at 4.71 seconds. Keep in mind the PKM's reload time is 6.77 seconds with the same magazine capacity. Now if you did want to speed that up, you could use the sleight of hand weapon perk, which will help a little bit with this. It'll cut your reload add time down to 3.8 seconds. Moving on to movement speed, this is relatively standard for the LMG category at 90%, and our aim down sight stray speed is extremely slow, but normal for LMGs at 36%. And with that, that wraps it up for all of these standard stats for the Mk9 Bruen. However, there's one other thing to mention. This gun does have an open bolt design in real life. However, as far as I can tell, at least based on my testing, there is no open bolt delay in game with this. So when you pull the trigger, the gun will actually go off immediately, which you can't say the same thing about a lot of the other open bolt LMGs. But now that we have the base stats out of the way, let's move on to some of the unique attachments, and let's kick it off with the barrels. The first barrel is the XRK Horizon 23-inch barrel, and with this one we get a 20% increase to our damage range, which is a really nice boost. And on top of that, it does help with our bullet velocity, which is going to help us hit our targets at longer ranges, especially if those targets are moving. The only downside to this is our aim down sight time is increased by 2 frames at 60 FPS, so our new aim down sight time is 484 milliseconds, which isn't too great considering this already has a very slow aim down sight time. So that's the first barrel. Now let's move on to the second one, which is the 26.8-inch Summit barrel. And with this one, we get a 25% increase to our damage range, so a little bit more than the previous barrel. And once again, our bullet velocity is improved. But on top of that, we get one other pro, and this is, it helps with our recoil control. which if we have a look at it side by side here, you can definitely see that it is helping with your recoil control. I don't know how necessary that is because, like I said earlier, it is very easy to predict and control the recoil on this gun, but you can see that it does help. Now, the downsides to this is, first off, we lose a good amount to our aim down sight speed. Our new aim down sight time is 517 milliseconds, which is painfully slow. And on top of that, our overall movement speed is reduced by 1%. As a result, when comparing this barrel to the previous one, it seems like a no-brainer to me. That extra 5% range and also the added recoil control that's just not necessary, in my mind, it's just not worth that reduced aim down sight speed. And therefore, I don't see myself ever touching this barrel. But this does leave us with one more barrel, and this is the 18-inch Para barrel, and with this one, this helps our aim down sight speed. Our new aim down sight time is 400 milliseconds, which is a nice improvement, and our overall movement speed is improved by 1%. As for the downsides, we lose bullet velocity, and therefore we also lose damage range. This will reduce our ranges by 10%, and on top of that, we also lose a little bit of recoil control. Taking a look at that, you can see that there is definitely a bit more recoil while using this barrel, although I wouldn't say it's a massive increase by any means, and therefore I would say it's very tolerable for this. The main downside is going to be that 10% loss to our ranges. And that covers it for the barrels, but another unique attachment we have access to is the skeleton stock, and with this one, it improves our aim down sight movement speed by 15%, so quite a nice boost to that, and it also helps our aim down sight time just a little bit. Our new aim down sight time with the skeleton stock is 434 milliseconds. Next up for the attachments, we have magazine attachments, and the first one is a 200 round belt magazine, and with this one, our aim down sight speed is reduced by 2 frames at 60 FPS, so our new aim down sight time is 484 milliseconds, and our overall movement speed is reduced by 5%, which is a massive reduction to our movement speed. This really slows you down. But finally, this leaves us with one last unique attachment, and this is the 60 round mags. And with this, there's actually quite a few benefits. Our aim down sight speed is improved by 3 frames at 60 FPS, so it's now 400 milliseconds, which is really nice, but it's still not even close to as fast as the assault rifles. Also, our sprint out times are improved just by 1 frame at 60 FPS. This is hardly noticeable, so I basically ignore that upside with the 60 round mag. Our movement speed is also improved by 3%, which is a nice little boost. It brings it almost up to the assault rifle movement speed. And another change with these 60 round mags that isn't mentioned at all is our reload add time is significantly improved. Our new reload time with the 60 round mags is just 1.69 seconds. And with sleight of hand, you can even cut that down to 1.3 seconds, which is right down there with the assault rifles in the game. As a result, this is actually one of my favorite attachments to use on this LMG, at least for my playstyle. You get so many benefits out of this, and the only downside is the fact that you have a 60 round mag instead of a 100 round mag, but when you also factor in the reload times, you get a huge improvement there, and therefore I would gladly take 60 rounds over 100 here. And with that finally covers it for all of the stats as well as the unique attachments for the Mk9 Bruen. Now I want to move into some great attachment combinations and example class setups. And the first one is for more of that traditional LMG sort of a role. And with this one, we've got the compensator to help with our recoil a little bit. We've also got the XRK Horizon 23-inch barrel, which is the one that boosts our damage range by 20%, which is a nice little boost. Our optic is going to be a Solo Zero Mini Reflex. I really like that one. Also, we've got the skeleton stock as well as the stippled grip tape to help compensate for the fact that we are increasing our aim down sight time a decent amount with the other attachments. Overall, this one is great for just kind of hanging back and picking people off at range and treating it like you generally should treat an LMG. As for the rest of the class, this one's set up more for like ground war modes, for instance. With this, we've got the Renetti as our secondary. We've got EOD for perk 1, Hardline for perk 2, and Shrapnel for perk 3, combined with those thermites so we can take those tanks out a lot easier. As for our tactical, this is just going to be a stim shot. That's just what I always use in the tactical slot while playing multiplayer. So while that's a great LMG sort of class setup, if you're treating this like an LMG, my general playstyle is more so geared towards run and gun, or at the very least moving around the map relatively aggressively. So this next setup is my preferred setup for this LMG. So with this one, we're using a monolithic suppressor because I do want to stay off the radar with this. I'm going to be flanking my enemies, I'm going to be up in the action, and I don't want to be showing up on the radar constantly. We've also got the shorter barrel, the 18-inch Para barrel, to help with our aim down sight time, which is really nice. On top of that, we once again have the skeleton stock. It's just nice to have that boosted aim down sight stray speed, as well as boosted aim down sight speed. Then we've got the stippled grip tape, and then finally, we've got the 60 round mags on this. I really like using 60 round mags just because I can treat this a bit more like an assault rifle, rather than sort of feeling forced into the role of an LMG. As for the rest of the class for this one, again, I've got Renetti as my secondary, EOD is perk 1, Ghost is perk 2 because I do want to stay off the radar and be relatively stealthy, and Battle Hardened is perk 3. This just leaves us with our equipment. For the lethal, this is going to be a C4, and our tactical is going to be a stim shot. And with that, that wraps it up for today's gun guide on the brand new Mk9 Bruen. As for my thoughts on this LMG, my initial impression was a little bit off. I have definitely changed my opinion now that I've got this in my hands and had a deeper look at the stats on this. Initially, I kind of saw it as a slightly better version of the Holger, but now I actually see this as a slightly better version of the PKM. It's actually better in almost every way compared to the PKM. Yes, the PKM does beat it very slightly in aim down sight time, but with the right attachment setup, you can easily make up for that. And I think one of the highlights that really puts it up above the PKM for me is the ability to have that 60 round magazine, so it just straight up better suits my particular playstyle. Additionally, this gun has a ton of potential in Warzone. This series isn't really based around Warzone because I'm not going to go back and cover every single gun I've already covered since before Warzone was around, but I thought it was a worthy mention. This gun definitely has a ton of potential there because it's got an insanely high DPS value, and therefore you can really melt through armor quickly. But with that, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of the Mk9 Bruen? Do you really like this LMG? Do you hate it? Are you somewhere in between? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.